Here we are, Renee, another podcast. What's our topic today?
Well, today we're going to start on a different topic series on meetings and how to do them well, how to do them wrong. You and I would bet, are experts in the field of meetings at this point, and really giving some tips and tricks on how to best use consultants and how to get the most for your money, I think is where we're going to head with this new series, because we've got a lot of people wasting a lot of time and a lot of our time and money.
Yep.
And so they're wasting their money by wasting our time, or vice versa. So we're trying to give people more of a heads up on how to do it right. But today we're just going to start off slow, going to dive just a little wade into the pool on how have we forgotten how to meet and how to do meetings. And I think this sounds like there's a personal story or two coming, Jason, because this is one of
It
your
might
last
be.
minute brainchild. So I'm thinking there's
It
some
is.
meetings that are like, I think we forgot how to do it. So, and it kind of goes with our big themes of convening, which is one of the big things we do as a company. We convene, but you convene with a purpose. And so sometimes
Right.
we get really off track just right there. But before we really dive into all this, I see you're on the road again. How's the farm? What's going on?
Well, ironically, I'm on the road to go attend a meeting, because we drive 4 hours for a 15-minute meeting. That's
Oh boy.
just normal, right, Renee?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I can't look at my bean field right now because there was a small reaction to the last spray pass that we did, and we
Uh-oh.
stunted all the beans. So only a couple hundred acres of beans. So we don't have
Uh-oh.
enough issues on the farm. So I can't look at them right now. So I'm waiting. We had a
Uh-oh.
lot of rain. Maybe after a couple of weeks, they'll bounce back and then I'll look at them again. But right now I'm avoiding the farm, and it's painful to look at, Renee. Painful.
Yeah. We've had a couple chats on here about chemical reactions, and when that happens, pooh, you don't even know what you're going to get.
Yep.
The lawn here, we just got an update from the HOA saying they're going to add an
Yeah.
extra day of watering to help with the brown spots. Do you know how much it's rained? So
To
do you
say
think an
it's
extra day of watering is going to fix
no,
whatever the problem is?
no,
All you listeners out
no.
there, the answer is no. So
Yeah.
I'm just sitting back going, well, my HOA decided they could do it all themselves. They're brilliant. They know what they're doing. So,
Mhm.
okay, that's what's wrong with the yards. Uh-huh. It's probably some sort of mold or fungus because it's been so wet, but what do I know about yards?
Yep. Yep.
So, all right. So let's walk into this conversation. This is going to deep dive it, kind of start this series off about how to meet, how to consult, how to use your resources well. Meetings. We think people have forgotten how to have a meeting. So, Jason, why don't you kick us off? What's top of mind for you as to how we got here?
I have so many thoughts on this topic, Renee. It's because, in the last couple of months, I feel like I've been in so many bad meetings. And so I'm like, how could we better talk about this? I mean, it's not just the whole people trying to zoom it in, right? Like, we're big advocates of getting back face to face. But
Yeah,
if you are going to take the time and energy to get people and drag them kicking and screaming back to an office to meet face to face, then we have to make it worth people's while. And we
we
have to
do.
have some standards in place. And boy, I think that's what we've forgotten.
Wow, do I have a story for you? I don't know if I should tell it now to kick off this podcast or wait to
Well,
the end, but
no
maybe I'll kick it
time.
off now. So the state of Iowa has reorged the state, so we're now all under one big enterprise. And one of the last pieces so far, there's probably more pieces, but one of the last pieces so far was to move people's performance plans to an online situation and make them more general so that they're the same kind of goals across all the enterprise. Now, you
Yes.
realize that means every department, people don't have close to the same job. So we're making very vague statements that you can review people's performance. Basically, it's making it more challenging to get raises, et cetera, et cetera. So I was assigned 6 meetings, Jason, 6 meetings in 30 days. I had to do the training first before I could get to the 6 meetings because I have 6 employees that have to do them. And the meeting was supposed to be, I don't know how long they thought the meeting was supposed to be, but literally I couldn't prep it in advance because it says you had to push this button when you have the person in the room, do a one-on-one or whatever to push start. So I could never see really what it
Oh,
was. I did the training and whatever.
yeah.
Those meetings lasted less than 10 minutes.
Hmm.
I booked, luckily, not more than 30 minutes, but six
Yeah.
30-minute slots in this cramped time frame right before the holidays to power all these out, and they took less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
This, I think, is what we're talking about today, folks. Ridiculous about a meeting. And there was a point, there was a purpose, whatever. But really, I had to do a one-on-one for 10 minutes. I'm like, what are we talking about? So, and it was a industry wide, the whole state had to do it. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
bad things were going to happen if you didn't. Okay. Am I grateful it was only 10 and not 45 an hour? Yes. But why was it a meeting? I mean, it could have been an email. And we've heard that cliche, but gosh, so
Mhm.
many times. What else, Jason? What brings you to light on this? What's some meetings that have not gone well for you?
Well, I mean, part of it is just, I was thinking back as I was preparing this, I was just thinking back to the last 30 days. And I challenge everybody to do this. How many meetings did you actually go to in the last 30 days? And exactly to your point, how many of those needed to be a meeting? How many of those should have been an email? How many of those do you feel like you didn't get what you got out of it? Um, how many of them did you not even participate in? And I think that's the bigger issue, right? I go to
Yeah.
meetings and I see the blank screens, or I see people who never once say anything. I mean, that's what we do is we facilitate meetings, but a lot of times we're there to support the convener. We're there to support the entity that's putting the meeting on. And so, we're trying to prop them up. We're trying to make sure everyone's engaged. And it's hard to deflect that back. Yesterday I was on a Zoom call, share one story, and it was a group we've worked with three of the people in the room who are leading the meeting. So people are comfortable coming back to me. And so there was a breakout room session, which is always hard because I'm not a provider. We're just there to help support people. And so, I help stir on the conversation. I'm not even being paid to be there at this moment. And we get back to the big room, and guess who they call on right away to share what's going on, Renee?
Oh, you.
Because me, I even had my camera off. Like I'm trying to like I had a t-shirt on. I'm like getting ready to run out the door. I was just listening in on this conversation. No means did I think I was going to participate in any way. I
Yep.
get called out. And so
Yep.
I immediately deflect back to someone else in our breakout room. I said, "Hey, this young lady had some really good points to talk about. Maybe she should share first." And so we were able to do that, and it made a lot of sense. And I got more people involved. But I end up, of course, educating folks, Renee, because you can't call on me and expect I'm not going to say something because I had thoughts about the
Yep.
process.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but a good meeting leader is going to balance that with making sure you're getting engagement from everyone. And I think that's where we miss the boat so often.
Yeah, I've been to one of those meetings too, and it wasn't my meeting. I wasn't called to the meeting.
Yeah,
I wasn't on the, as far as I knew, on the agenda. And
yeah,
I step in, and that is exactly what happens. And then I become kind of the de facto consultant in a group that
yes.
I am not paid to consult.
No,
And they're just like, "Well, Renee's here. What do you think?" And I'm like,
yeah,
I just stopped going to those meetings. I mean, we've talked about this before, but
yeah,
I really put a kibosh on meetings. And one of them was if they didn't have agendas and if we didn't have a
yeah,
purpose for them, I'm not doing them. And I wasn't going to put them in perpetuity on a calendar because I have
yeah,
stuff to do. And so I just stopped a lot of bad meetings. And I didn't say I wouldn't come, but I said I will come if you need me on the agenda, if you tell me
yes,
what the agenda is, if you want me to participate, I will be there. Or if it's an agenda you need me to hear or learn from, I'm going to be there. I said, but if you can't tell me what it is, and it's just a time on the calendar, I'm not coming. That saved countless hours because in government, there's a lot of people that feel like their jobs are really important and all they do is sit in meetings. And that's what they think they're doing to move a needle. It doesn't do anything. And what shocks me, and maybe it's not just you, but maybe the communication is often worse in places with more meetings. It's like
yes,
people the right all the people don't get all the information even though they're crammed to the gills with meetings. And so I am so confused by that because it's like you guys all you ever do is quote communicate, but yet no one knows anything. So what in the world are you doing during those times? And so you get into these things and nobody knows the real meat of whatever. So it's like, but all you do is meet. So then what, right? And so I mean, think so. Yeah, there's just a lot to this. So we've got some data on this topic because we're not the only ones that feel this way. So there's other people thinking about how meetings are not helpful. So what do you think about that?
yeah. I pulled a ton of data, and I think that's really the conversation. I think we should focus in on. And I think to your point about agendas, before we jump to that, because one of the data points that we're looking at here is kind of that 40-20-40 rule. And that was good for me to remind myself of that, right? Because when we think about meetings, 40% of the meeting is preparation you do before you even get to the meeting, right? And so if you're going to a
Yes.
meeting and you haven't put more time and effort into it than the time set aside for the meeting, then you're
Yes.
doing it wrong, right? 20%
Yes.
is what the meeting happens itself. And 40%, the other 40% is the follow up and execution from what you decide to do and what needs to happen based upon what you learned and what you shared and the feedback you got in the meeting, right? And so I
Yes.
think we need to go back to that 40-20-40. It goes back to your point of agenda setting. 40% of your prep time is setting the agenda, being clear, having clear cut goals, knowing ahead of time what is it I have to get out of this meeting so that I can do my job or I can execute on this project. That's the whole thing, right? And that's where I think we're doing meetings wrong because we aren't putting the preparation in upfront to get it done correctly. And that's having impact on the return of investment on that meeting. Because if we're just meeting to meet, we're wasting a whole lot of people's time and it's costing us, especially in government. I do this as well with government meetings I have to go to. I'm chair of a couple committees that I serve on. We have standing meetings to set the agenda that no one knows if we can put those items on the agenda or not. And then it has to go back to another meeting for someone else to then come back and report to us as the public if that can be an agenda item or not. So we have meetings to make meetings around just setting the agenda of the quarterly meeting. Right, Renee?
Yeah.
You know what this is like.
I do. So the part that just struck me with your 40-20-40 is actually the follow-up execution portion for
Yeah.
us. We do a whole lot of prep and a lot of meeting itself, but I'm not as great at following back up, especially if stuff gets
Mhm.
assigned and make sure stuff gets done on that back part. And
Yep.
again, so it's different. I have some meetings in my office where it's just more of an update. This is where we are and tracking
Mhm.
and trending to like the strategic plan, the operational plan and goals, and so making sure everybody understands where we are with different projects and different meters and all those kinds of things. But sometimes there really are pieces that are assigned to folks to get done, and we may or may not remember to go back to the meeting. So
Yep.
I'm not the best at stringing meeting to meeting together.
Yep.
And so that for me is a great reminder for myself to be better in that space for the execution and follow up, because there's a lot of people in those meetings, to your point, who are just absorbing information, and what we would call them in church is pew potatoes, couch
Yep.
potatoes, who are just absorbing
Yep.
like a big sponge, but then they're not wringing it out, using it, doing any kind of value with
Right.
it. And so then what again are they in the meeting for? Again, why
Right.
are they in the meeting if it's just to build knowledge or to sit and type on their laptop? And what
Yep.
was the point when there's probably something they're supposed to take from that and to go? So better meetings are the ones that have like the what's the one thing you're going to do at the end of this meeting, kind of that action plan portion. And I'm sure you
Yep.
have a little more data about that too.
Yeah, before we jump into that, I'll remind everyone why is this important, right? 50% of professionals sit in 3 or more meetings a day. So we think about a 5-day work week,
That's a lot of meeting.
3 to 4 meetings. So half of your week is spent in meetings.
Yeah.
So that's why we really need to have conversations about this because are we training people enough in how to meeting? Because that's what you're paying people to do half of their time is to sit in meetings. Now, is that the work that you're paying them to do? I think that's the question you have to ask. Like, depending on what your business model is, it might be to have people sit in meetings all day. However, probably more than not, there's other things somebody should be doing other than just sitting in a meeting all day.
Right. And if you think back to that whole execution portion, if you're in your meetings half the week, when are you executing on the work you're supposed to be doing at the end of said meetings? Right. And then the
Exactly.
expectations pile upon pile because everybody's meeting is going to have a different action plan or a different thing. So the time you leave, you have like all these action plans, but no time to take action. And all the steps probably stepped on one another. So now you have five things that are top priority. So that means
Yep.
nothing gets done. And so you're much better off streamlining the meeting and pulling everybody together into
Yeah.
one, prioritizing, getting it all straight so that the people that leave know what to do.
And this piece of data struck me, and it came from Microsoft Work Trend Index. So I think it's legitimate, but it talked about since 2020, the amount of meetings that most employees sit in have doubled, and some studies show tripled, right? So this came on during the pandemic. We started meeting more, and partly it was because of virtual, hybrid, remote work. People had to check in more, right? Or felt like they had to check in more. And so we doubled or tripled the number of meetings we have. So this is fairly new, right? Because now
Yeah.
we're having to go back and figure out, wait a minute, and that's why I'm like, are we doing this wrong? Because I think we did forget how to do it. And then we just started having so many meetings because we were panicked and traumatized through the pandemic, not knowing what we were supposed to do, what our roles were at work. And now we don't know what else to do, so we just call a meeting because we don't know what else to do.
That's crazy. Yeah, I end up most of the time my meetings are in person, but it's only monthly. And it gets canceled if there's no agenda because I'm not going to hold an
Yeah,
agenda less meeting because
yeah.
I'm a big fan of agendas. So either we have one or we don't. So but you're right. It's like the folks that are out of office, it's harder to catch up with some of the things. My last monthly meeting, we had two or three that were gone for vacations and such. And it was important information. So I had to, but back to your point on follow up and follow through, make sure I circled back to them to get them the information that we talked about in the meeting, specifically related to budget and some higher level stuff because they needed to know. And so, but it was on me to make sure they got caught up or
Right.
make sure they come to me to check in about different things because it did impact them. But it's hard. And so I can see how from a management position wanting to do more meetings when you have people remote because they fall out of the
Mhm.
loop very quickly if you're not top
Yeah.
of mind on that. So I get it, but man, that's a lot of wasted time.
It is. And you kind of talked about how do we measure the effectiveness of our meetings, right? And what are the key things we should be measuring and reflecting on? And this is something I don't do well at all. And I think this is really hard. And I don't know many people who do this well. But, we should be measuring timeliness. Do we start on time? Do we end on time? And that's something that's really important to us. We don't go over on meetings in anything that we do. We pride ourselves on that. Attendance, do you keep regular attendance? Do you look at attendance tracking? Do you know who should be at the meeting and who shows up at the meeting? I love time plan versus time spent on action items. Like, are we actually following up and knowing, wait a minute, this is way over somebody's head? Like, what do we need to do to help somebody out? Do we track the decisions made? So we're not 3 months out going, what was it that Renee said about this? Were we going to do that or weren't we going to do that? And is it accessible? Do we keep meeting minutes? Do we have those meeting overviews somewhere that clearly states these things? And then finally, this is one that I think that we should be tracking a lot more is participation and engagement of the participants, right? On your team, who is the person always talking and who is the person who has really good ideas but don't speak up? that don't speak in your meetings? And do we look at that and do we say, hey, wait a minute, how do we better empower so and so? And how do we help so and so not take over? Because I have a takeover personality and I have to really hold myself back in meetings, Renee, because I have thoughts and I'm not afraid to share my thoughts. That's probably gotten worse in the consultant years of my career because people want to hear your thoughts and they try to pull them out of you. But sometimes it shouldn't be me saying it. There's other people in the room who need to say it. And it's my job to make them say it, not to have me say it.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of this has to do with personalities of the people on your team. And so if
Yeah.
you have, I've spent a lot of time in this because it's really helped me lead this team. I have a team, for those that don't know, at the parole board, we've got people in all different personalities. It's not like a typical like teachers where everybody
Mhm.
leans one direction. This is a wild bunch. And so it's one of everything. And so from that perspective, I started really working with coach and trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to communicate because they don't all
Yeah.
communicate the same way. So I've got some people who need the agenda items up front so they can think about it so they can participate in a meeting. And some people then still need to hear the meeting and then have feedback, but like later after they've taken time to process it and deep think it through.
Mhm.
And if I'm not paying attention, I only hear the chatterboxes that talk right then
Yep.
and skip the folks that have the deep thought process because they
Yep.
take longer to get feedback. And so you really do have to go back to them and be like, okay, what we talked about the other day, I'm going to want feedback from you this many days out and make sure that they
Mhm.
understand that that feedback is critical, but they have to give it to you. And it's not always, you don't always get it. And so, it gets challenging because as a leader, you get frustrated because you're like, just tell me what the heck you're thinking so I can use your thoughts or
Right.
whatever. But that's not how they work. So you have to be thoughtful of that. But you're right. You have to kind of calm the ones that don't shut up in meetings. Like
Right.
it doesn't pertain to you. You need to hold it
Right.
because we're letting other people talk. So you kind of have to have that, group facilitation skills to run a decent meeting. And if you're listening and you don't have those group facilitation skills, that's why you pay for a consultant or a facilitator to help you. And if you can give the facilitator some heads up about these folks are really, really good, but they're more quiet. And this person's going to be more dominant in the conversation. And you kind of give them a little bit of information coming in. They can help make sure that the quiet people get to speak or do activities in the meeting so that there's writing involved instead of just speaking, or all those things that can help pull out people that have great ideas who don't feel so comfortable speaking out. And often it takes you just a second to see why they're not. They'll say something and then the big chatterbox smacks it down. And then you're like, well, no wonder they don't speak. Right.
Right.
And so there's reasons why it's that quiet group that often has some of the best.
And you just said the most important part of the meeting. It's the 40% after the meeting. It's the follow-up. And this is where we have to teach people to get back to us. If you ask for follow-up in a meeting, that means the participants they have to follow up, right? They need to take time and understand that 40% of the meeting is what they're going to do to give back after the meeting. I can't tell you how many meetings I've had in the last 6 months that there was follow up and I never received a single email. That, we facilitate a meeting and we're like, if you'd like input, we need you to send us this. Silence. And that's across the board, right? Like CEOs, everyone, because they're hiring us to do something. So they should be invested in following up. But I think people have forgotten the key elements of following up and why that's important. And that's part of the meeting, right? The meeting doesn't end when the meeting's done. That's really the beginning. That's when the work starts. Um, Boy, and it's just really tough.
Yeah. And so then I think the last piece here is just making sure that there's return on the investment of even having the meeting. And
Right.
at some point, if you don't have any reasons to have a meeting, you should cancel it. It's like there's no reason to just have a meeting for sake of meeting. And so there's other ways for people to check in and show you that they are still alive and they're still working remotely than having to sit through a whole meeting. And so, if the meeting isn't doing what you needed to do anymore and it's lost its juice or it never had juice, that's the time to make change. And so whether it's a different location or different population or different, who needs to be there or different time. Sometimes, I mean, I've heard these terrible stories, but people will make a meeting like 8 o'clock in the morning to verify everybody's there. But yet half your team has kids,
Right.
that need to get to
Right.
school. So they're always coming in a little bit late. But
Right.
that's like the boss's thing to make sure they're on time. But is that really doing anything, right? It's like that's not
Mm-mm.
helpful when you could give them an hour to settle in, get into the
Right.
office, and then try a meeting after everybody's had a few minutes to grab their coffee, to get their notes,
Right.
to get it together so they could come meet. And so you just have to be thoughtful. The same as like Friday afternoons after lunch. I mean, seriously, what are we doing? Like, come on now. And so like thinking about like when's a good time to have a meeting and not just because, well, I want to make sure everybody's still in the office at 2 o'clock on Friday.
Right.
Really? I mean, you don't even want to be in the office at 2 o'clock on Friday. So it's
Right.
like make some changes to some of that stuff. That's craziness.
Well,
So
and
the
I think
next
I was going to say before we move on, to define the purpose, right? And so setting an agenda is so important. I think that's the most important part of a meeting is having an agenda and following the agenda and being clear about that. And if we don't have a purpose and an agenda to match it, you're right. We shouldn't be having the meeting.
No. So now we're going to kind of bump into some ideas just off the top of like, how do we improve our meetings? So the agenda piece is one big part of this
Absolutely.
conversation. But past that, there's some other good things to think about. And I mean, just today, the reminder of that, you really ought to, on your agenda, even start with follow up from the previous meeting. To be
Yep.
fair, if you're really going to make meeting to meeting, it's like, okay, the things we talked about last time, did we get these things done if there were assignments given? And then make that so that people are accountable. And so that could even help with accountability because if they know they come to the next meeting and they have to have done X, Y, and Z that they were assigned to do, you can start with that and see where you are
Yep.
and kind of begin. The other thing I've talked about before, I always start with wins. I have a really hard job with a
Mhm.
lot of negative stuff, and it's real easy
Yep.
in our office to just focus on the negative and the ridiculous and the crazy. And so we always start with positive. And there's one who's a chatterbox who's always more optimistic. That's just her personality. So she always leads it off. And I'm kind of grateful because it gives other people, but it's still hard for people to think of positive things, even though we've done this now for a year and a half. They still don't always think of the positive. So I make them like, okay, what's working? What went right? Let's start off the meeting in a positive way. Give kudos. if there's somebody that's improved in some area that we're working on, or they got some great feedback from the public or whatever, we try to make that a positive so that you don't want meetings to always be negative because people don't want to come. So it's always like this whole, okay, there's things that are good. I know it's easy to remember the bad, but what is happening that we can be proud of in the office? And that's really made people show up, at least to our meetings.
Mhm. The next one would be realistic about your agenda and what you can accomplish. And once you've accomplished it, stop meeting or change the focus to something else. I think so many times meetings just continue on because it's an unsolvable problem that no one can solve. But yet time and energy goes into trying to solve that problem that literally is unsolvable. And you've been in those meetings, right, Renee? Where you're
Yeah.
meeting about something that you have no control over at all, but you continue to meet and talk about it for 20 minutes a week, every other week for
It sort
infinity.
of turns into this negative support group thing, right? Where
Yes.
everybody's bemoaning the fact that we don't have enough money or enough
Yeah.
workforce to do the whatever. And then, I mean, you guys just did this, right? You did the big state panel review of what meetings, and some people were
Yeah.
begging you to make sure that the new entity funds this ongoing meeting. And you find out that the
Right.
meeting is just wallowing in self-pity and terribleness. And
Right.
so you're like, no, that meeting should not continue in
Right.
perpetuity. That should go away.
Right.
But, people just think somehow they're working because they're out bitching with their neighbors about whatever's terrible in the
Mhm.
world and do it on the regular. And then you're like, can't
Mhm.
figure out why there's no progress or whatever. I mean, that's wild.
Mhm.
But yeah. So the other thing is meetings don't have to stay in perpetuity. They can come for a season
Right.
and go. And so sometimes there's like, you need to dial in something. And I'm in that season right now. There's a few things we need to dial in. So we've put some extra meetings on the agenda. I don't think it's going to be forever, but it's for right now because we need to correct some things and make sure some things are top of mind. So we do our work week and then we review the work week for a short meeting.
Yep.
Now we're doing it on a regular cadence to just until we get these things corrected because it was not enough meeting. I was in the position of only once a month and it wasn't enough. And so now I can put it in. I don't know how long it's going to go, but for right now, there's still purpose, there's still a point, there's still an agenda. So we're going to keep it. So I'm sure you've been in meetings that after a while, you're like, we don't need to keep doing this anymore. Like
Right.
we should stop.
Absolutely. And that means pull the plug, right? And that's the hard thing. Somebody has to make the decision. We're not meeting anymore because we don't need to. If there something comes up, then we'll start the meetings and we'll do it on a regular cadence. I think that's a key element though. Like if you're going to have meetings that are going to continue over any type of time frame, you need to have a regular cadence to it. Otherwise, it's too disruptive and people don't get what they should get out of the meeting.
Yeah. And one more just topic, and this is a little different, but I do it for my personal self, of my own personal schedule if I can. I try to put all my meetings on one day. I try to have a meeting Monday where I knock out like the team meetings and the different types of meetings with the extender stakeholders and all those folks. Try to get them all kind of on one day so then I can focus on my work the rest of the week. And so in your case, your meeting is your work, so you can't always do that. But you
Right.
do that related to your business meetings and your
Mhm.
maybe other topics of meetings that you have business related, business adjacent that
Right.
aren't your work. But, I try to do, I mean, I do my work during work days, but I try to do these extra meetings at certain times. And so I don't just let any day be a meeting day. And there's days I just have on my calendar, I won't take a meeting. And I don't, I have other things to work on, other things to think about, other projects to do more focus work on. And it's so disruptive to have some check in for
Mhm.
5 minutes with somebody about something that I didn't need to do today. And so I really protect my calendar the best I can as a leader by setting aside certain time for meetings and then the rest. And so that's what was so hard about having those spontaneous extra 6 meetings. I had to do them all over the place just to get them done,
Right.
then realized that they weren't really worth the time of the meeting. So I was like,
Right.
yay, such a great time.
You know, and when it's in the regular course of your work and that happens, that's one thing. But it's not uncommon that I'll have to take 2 airline flights to go to a meeting and then have it be not worth my time,
Right.
right? And so I think it's changed my perspective on meetings as I travel more, as we do work across multiple states where someone says, "We have to be at this meeting. This is the most important meeting that I need you at." And then we're like, okay, help us understand the purpose. What's the agenda? And you get there and none of those things happened, right? All of the things that you were told may or may not be true, or, and so even when you vet those things and you check them out, sometimes it's a cultural issue. Sometimes it's just that region. There's just lots of variables, right? And so we see it from all different sides right now. And I think it's good to take pause. And I think we're going to have to do a deeper dive into some of these issues because there's so many things as we're going through here using AI, you know,
Mm.
other details to meetings that can really help us, but if not used appropriately, actually cost us more time.
Yeah, and to your point about from that consultant perspective, if you're out there and you have a consultant, you have a coach, you have a somebody, and you want them to show and you're paying them the money, making
Yeah.
sure that you get your money's worth is so important instead of paying you to go all the way across the state to see nothing. Now, I do remember one of um, my very first contract in North Dakota way back in the day. We had a organization. I was supposed to have regional meetings, and I drove all the way to nowhere, North Dakota,
Yeah.
far, far. They did not promote the meeting, and not one person showed up.
Yep.
And I got paid to go far.
Yep.
I had a hotel, the whole thing, and they
Yep.
just didn't promote it. And I now the lack of promotion and the evidence of what happened was good for what I needed, and I could make change because it was a HHS
Yep.
issue. And so it hit the top. I mean, it hit the
Hmm.
top. And for me to have to do that to show them how bad it was,
Yeah.
but what a horrible situation for them, for me, for everybody.
Yep.
And the state was ticked. And so it turned into this thing. And so in some cases it's good, but when you get the
Yes.
consultant to do the work and they show and nobody's there, it is not a good look for the funder, for the people involved, and then the poop hits the fan, if you pardon
Yep.
that. But they do, it just hits. And so I remember sometimes that as a consultant, and I mean, I'm still
Mhm.
going to do my job, but then they're like, okay, how'd it go? Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, and then they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. So then you don't get any public feedback from that entire segment of wherever you
Yeah.
are trying to get the public feedback. It was a public meeting supposed to be with public feedback, and they just didn't tell anybody. And so then no public was invited. So then you have to do a report, or you have to try to set it up a second time, or you just have a segment of this whatever population is just not represented because
Hmm.
whatever. And it's bad. And so, I mean, we are going to do a much deeper dive into this because I'm telling you from a consultant side on how to use a consultant, from just your day to day work, how to do meetings, owning your own business, how to do meetings and not do meetings. We have had so much just experience, and there's good things and bad things that you can do with this. So follow along. We're going to do a little deeper dive into this whole how to do this well because we've wasted a lot of our time and probably some other people's time along this journey.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that before I dive into the self-care policy?
No, I'm looking forward to the meeting where we plan this podcast, Renee.
I'm looking forward to the planning meeting for the podcast. I'll make sure you have an
Yeah.
agenda.
Okay.
And maybe some frosty beverages to help with the planning. Ooh, that'll make it
Yes.
better. All right, so the recovering politician self-care policy of the week. This is a simple one, but I like to take half days in the summer. Summer, I love summer and I love activities in the summer. So sometimes for me, because I do have a more of the 8 to 5 type job, it's just taking half day. I don't have to have the whole day. I don't have to have big agenda, but sometimes I need a little extra time. And we've talked about this on the self-care summer podcast that we just did a couple weeks ago. But I really do like to take a little bit of extra time. So that may mean working extra time early, late. Right now, because the sun's up so early, I'm up early. So it's easy for me to start my days earlier in the summer so I can get done a little earlier in the afternoon. I've got VBS coming up next week. I'm taking every afternoon off a little early because I figured out that it really sucked. I worked all the way to work and rushed to get to VBS in the evening, and I'm just exhausted. I didn't get good food, tired. So last year I decided, well, that's silly. Why don't I just end my days earlier for that week? And then I have them a couple hours to myself before I go serve. Made the biggest world of difference. I could eat dinner at the old people hour of like 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
4:30, but I had real food. And then I'd go in the evening and go do my activities for the week, and it was fantastic. So I'm looking forward to that. It's much more strategic, much more planful, but better use of my time for self-care. So I don't know, Jason, you getting those little half days in, little activities in while you're on the road, while you're out and about?
Absolutely. And I think that's part of, we look at, small business owners and stuff is you're constantly melding your personal life and taking a little bit of time here and there to do other things, because you don't get formal time off, right? Like I don't have a
Mhm.
bank of vacation I'm drawing
Mhm.
from. And so it's just that constant balancing act, but keeping the balance in check, right? Because I do need to
Mhm.
take time off. And so there are weeks I block off. We have
Mhm.
blackout weeks where we
Mhm.
go and do stuff, but I'm constantly melding, I'll probably say this later in another podcast, but I'd go pick up a new head trailer in Western Iowa. So I did meetings until noon, jumped in my truck and went and, drove 8, 10 hours
Gotta do
throughout
it.
the rest of the day to take care of that. Right. So you kind of just meld everything together. I could still do some phone calls and, listen to some podcasts while I was driving. So, it's just constantly that balance that happens, that blend. I like to say blend instead of balance.
Mhm.
But we're always blending work and life, and so it's you got to figure out what works for you. So if taking those afternoons off is a better blend for you, then that's the way to do it. I think everyone should think about how can they blend better, because that just helps them be better at work and when they're doing other activities.
Yep. And then when I take those half days, I can't do any meetings, which is my favorite
Yeah,
part.
yeah,
So today, everybody, we talked about, we think people forgot how to do meetings. They just forgot. And so we started a conversation. We're going to start a series on all the weird things we've seen with meetings. And you guys have seen it too, but just a waste of your time, the waste of the consultant's time, and just all the resources, energy, effort that goes into meetings without a point and without, well, a direction. Who knows? But we're going to talk a lot more about that. Follow us along. We're going to do several part series on this topic because we are experts in that field of meeting. But before we go, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. If you leave us a positive review, we'll send you a prize. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.